Good afternoon, everyone. We'll officially call this meeting to order. A special meeting to start at 4:30. We're a couple of minutes late, but I think everything's okay. The first item on the agenda is public comment. Anyone in the audience wish to speak? Everybody happy campers, that's good. All right, number 3 on the agenda. Congressman McIntyre, you want to represent
Yes, sir.
your group?
Yes, sir. I'll come over here just to give the initial presentation, and then I'll sit back with the team to join them over there. I guess I can carry this mic over there too when we go, so we'll have a couple of microphones.
We're very informal, all of you.
Okay. But thank you. Out of respect, I want to be able to stand up and say thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you. It's been a very busy 5 months now since we've been working with you officially since the beginning of the year. And thank you for the hospitality today. We've already enjoyed a nice long time with the beach tour with your town manager. As always, David Hewitt does a great job, and he's taken me along with the 3 members of the Ferguson group that does the legislative monitoring, background research, daily monitoring for the activities on the Hill, as well as the legislative background. And also among the group, we have a retired former legal counsel with the Corps of Engineers itself. So their technical background exponentially helps us with the work we're doing on Capitol Hill, and we'll be hearing from them, or they'll be available to answer some of your very technical questions as well. Let me first give you an overview. As you know, I normally send you a monthly update. I won't stand here and read it because it's provided for you to go and to review, but I'll just highlight some things because I think that puts things in perspective, and I'll talk more specifically about our projects here at Holden Beach, and then we'll open it up for any questions. But we thought that would be a good time to come before you to bring you in person an update. The fiscal year 2020 appropriations process for the federal government is very much underway. Usually that starts with the State of the Union address by the President, usually in late January or in February. That was delayed a little bit this year because of the government shutdown, which I'm sure you recall back in the early part of the year. Then, once the President's budget gets to Capitol Hill, Congress does with it, quite honestly, whatever it wants. It doesn't matter who's the President, whether they're Democrat or Republican. Really, the budget is actually a recommendation to Congress, but not a requirement for Congress. So that's when the debate really gets underway. So we are now in the middle of that in earnest, really since from about Easter through Memorial Day, right on down to the 4th of July. Congress is in deep debate about appropriations and what should be done. In fact, the House Appropriations Committee has released the text for 7 of the 12 annual appropriations bills and has approved 2 of them already, the Military Construction Veterans Affairs bill and the Legislative Branch bill. The Senate has yet to release or even consider any of the appropriations bills. As usual, the Senate is a much more deliberative body. So they are expected to begin considering their first appropriations bill in early June, which as we know is just the week after next. One of the bills, though, that the House Appropriations Committee has released is on energy and water appropriations, which includes our friends at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, among other agencies. And there is a increase in allocation to energy and water by 4% that the House Appropriations Committee is considering. So we hope that will ultimately have some better ramifications for the work we do with the Corps. Nationally, that's $46.4 billion, which this has to be spread around a whole lot, but at least that's an increase, and that's always better than the opposite. There is also an amount that is an increase above actually the President's recommendation. So once again, Congress realizes how critical Corps of Engineers work is, and Congress is recommending an even higher amount than the White House recommended. And this includes money for investigations, construction, operations, and maintenance activities of the Corps. So there will be more details to be released later as the House Appropriations Committee goes through those details, and will probably not be released until they get ready to mark up the bill, which means they are done debating it internally in subcommittee and committee, and they're getting ready to decide what bill are we going to actually send to the floor of the House. Again, we will be waiting on our friends in the Senate on this. Now, with regard to some action that already has happened on May the 10th, just a couple of weeks ago, the House did pass a disaster aid package that we've been waiting on. That includes all recent natural disasters that they've tried to account for, including Hurricane Florence. This bill that they just passed costs $3 billion more than other disaster relief bills they previously considered because they've added tornadoes in Alabama, floods in the Midwest, and additional money for recovery from the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico. The Senate, however, still has not come forward with a disaster aid package. So again, that is subject to still there being some discussion. However, this very week, leading into Memorial Day, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hopes to get the Senate to pass a disaster aid package. So stay tuned. You may hear about it on the evening news between now and Friday. In the House bill, it did include a short-term extension of the National Flood Insurance Program, which I know you obviously have an interest in, as do all of our coastal communities. That would be through the end of the federal fiscal year, which is this coming September 30th. Now, the House is also, in addition to that extension, just to get us through on that NFIP, has passed a separate standalone bill that would also extend it so that even if the disaster aid package bill in its current form wasn't approved, there was still a separate standalone bill that would allow the National Flood Insurance Program to stay standing through the end of this federal fiscal year until it becomes a bill for a longer term. This is actually the 11th extension of this program on a short-term basis, which shows you that they cannot come to an agreement on a long-term fix, but they're doing it in increments. Also of note, the U.S. EPA has recently updated its guidance for planning for natural disasters. The last time it did it was 2008. It's updated that to the 2019 version. And so it obviously has several items of interest there on dealing with natural disaster debris, particularly, which a lot of communities have to deal with after the storm was hit. And then, on another note, because of the frustration about getting some disaster recovery funding, our Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina, along with Joe Manchin from West Virginia, and Senator Feinstein from California, and John Cornyn from Texas, clearly on a bipartisan basis, they put together a bill to direct the White House Office of Managing Budget to release $16 billion within the next 60 days to 9 states, including North Carolina. Money that's just been hung up. And then they're saying, let's free up the money, let's free it up. Kamala Harris and Ted Cruz are on the bill too as sponsors. So that shows you it's very bipartisan. And so they too are fed up with the wait. These funds also were originally appropriated for mitigation and resilience activities in the Bipartisan Budget Agreement Act of 2018, but more than a year has passed and the funds have not been released yet. So that's why the frustration. There's another bill on a bipartisan basis that G.K. Butterfield from North Carolina and Mark Meadows from up in the mountains are co-sponsoring. The Hazard Eligibility and Local Projects Act, which would expand eligible pre-award activities under the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program. Under current law, if there is an applicant that begins working on a project before it is awarded hazard mitigation funds, it's immediately disqualified, which sounds counterintuitive, but it kind of backfires on itself. So this bill will allow the applicant to go ahead and begin work on the project and even purchase land if needed that qualifies for a categorical exclusion under the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. Our U.S. Senators Richard Burr and Tom Tillis, along with Texas Senators John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, are introducing a similar bill in the Senate, as Congressman Meadows and Butterfield have done in the House. So there is, unfortunately, out of disasters, we do find a place that Congress is working on a bipartisan basis because we realize disasters do not discriminate. So that's in the overall arching picture. I thought you might want to get a handle on how things are shaping up in terms of funding and appropriations, where Congress is. We were up there with your town manager and assistant town manager. Both of them were with us as we went the second week in March, as you may recall, and was updated in our March monthly report. And we had excellent meetings with the headquarters of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And we also went over to OMB, Office of Management and Budget, which is usually the bugaboo, that you can work on a project, work your heart out, and then they decide, we're not sure if we want to fund that. Because as you know, there are no pork barrel projects anymore in Congress. They didn't want people favoring certain funds to certain projects. So now the logical extension of that, now that a few years have passed, is that, so then who makes the decisions? Who does get the money? And it's not accountability of elected officials, it's actually the bureaucrats now. So OMB decides, and U.S. Army Corps decides what projects within their district will get the funding. They're not directed by Congress to have to do a certain project anymore, so they get to decide. And that's true across the board, basically, for decisions about appropriations for funding. So there's a flip side to that whole situation, and that can be discussed and debated, but that's just the reality of the way it is right now. There is a movement now in Congress to reconsider how that's done because of the lack of accountability by non-elected officials and just making decisions about where to put money, and folks having to appeal to non-elected officials who don't have any other accountability really, because that's their regular job, and they just make those decisions for other reasons. Which is why we wanted to go to the top with the Corps of Engineers and have that meeting with them among those other meetings, including both of our senators and including congressmen from the coastal areas, which would include, of course, the late Congressman Walter Jones. His office continues to be great to work with on coastal projects. And then, of course, in our area, we work with Congressman Rouser. And in particular, he has a staff lady from Wellington who very well understands this area. And we've been able to work with her very closely on these projects. So we want to continue that. We'll probably be making a return trip to Washington in the next 2 to 3 months, hopefully before the August recess, when Congress then won't go back till September, and that's the last month before hopefully the October 1st federal budget would be passed if it's not under another continuing resolution, which has happened in recent years. So that's kind of the big picture. Now, with regard to what's happening specifically here, I know the point of emphasis and the work that you all assigned us is on Lockwood's Folly, and also on dealing, of course, overall, looking at the broader beach renourishment picture for Holden Beach. We're on Lockwood's Folly. We're pleased that the Wilmington District Corps of Engineers has confirmed now. There have been a lot of discussions after a long wait and a long stalemate. We have seen a flurry of activity recently with the Corps, and I think some things are happening because they know now we are watchdogging it, and then some things need to get done, and we've met with the higher-ups in Washington, and we're grateful for the responsiveness now that we're seeing, and that your town manager can attest to, that he's been seeing, and that he's also reported to you all on with regard to the Corps of Engineers suddenly paying attention to some of these issues. On Lockwood's Folly, now the Corps, in just the last couple of weeks, has confirmed that sand from the next intercoastal waterway contract will be going to Holden Beach. The Corps has said they will probably, all things considered, nothing else being considered, if they're just starting on how do we do this, they're going to look at, well, we'll flip it back and forth. We'll switch between Holden Beach and Oak Island for future contracts. However, what can make a change in that, starting out with an assumption they're going to flip it, is what about? What does the data say? What about erosion, accretion, navigation, potentially other factors that can impact the Corps decision? How are they going to know? Well, as your town manager well knows, there are great numbers and information that favor putting that sand on the Holden Beach side. And we want to help promote that, advocate for that, make sure that that's understood in terms of what needs to be done. Oak Island is certainly going to make their case too. The question is, objectively speaking, what do the numbers and the data say? There's a sediment transport analysis study that I understand will be presented to the board later today at your next meeting that shows the east end of Holden Beach is approximately 5 times has more erosion than the west end of Oak Island, and that's the kind of information that when we think about the littoral drift of the sand going down the length of Holden Beach, about why it makes more sense to look seriously at serving the concerns that we've been facing here on the east end of Holden Beach. The Corps said it costs about the same to place the sand on Oak Island as it does Holden Beach, but these other concerns about the ultimate economic benefit and the drift down the beach is a fact. These are not things that are not plain if you don't know what they are. You've got to study them, but you can present them. And that question of littoral drift, about the coastal storm damage reduction benefits along the length of Holden Beach, looking at what is the most efficient way to deal with this, the most cost-effective way to deal with this, and what makes the best economic and environmental sense. The Corps is willing to work with Holden Beach in looking at that and making sure that we are doing it in the most cost-efficient way and what makes the most sense. And that's where the data, and I commend the work of your town manager in putting together the data to help share that with the Corps, and the fact that the Corps now is paying very much attention to that concern. On the overall beach renourishment issues for Holden Beach, the second prong of what you've tasked us to help you work on, we could spend an hour or two if we wanted to walk back through the whole history of how did we get to the point we are today. But I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version because what we're concerned with is what now and what's going to happen next. And as we look back, the official U.S. Army Corps of Engineers document that went back to talk about the Brunswick County beaches included Ocean Isle, Oak Island, Caswell, and Holden Beach. There's a history that goes back to 1966. There was a plan of improvement. That was the original authorization to help those communities that I've just named. And that was the starting point with the Corps. In 2001, we know that the Ocean Isle Beach project became a separate one. Okay? And so you know there's a history of what Ocean Isle Beach has been able to do since that time, in 2001. Caswell Beach, Oak Island, and Holden have continued to be a project because of this original plan, the Brunswick County Beaches Plan, that continued to be under the same GRR, the General Reevaluation Report, which looks at a conceptual plan of how do we do improvements. So what has happened? Now we fast forward and we come up to right around 2013, and about $8 million had been spent studying what to do and how to do it. It's such a large project because it involved all these communities. There's about $8 million in a sunk fund, as they call it, that has been spent, and the Corps got to the point where it said, we've spent this money, and now we need to look at whether or not we're going to get a cost share to help finish this, $550,000 is needed to complete the project, and we're not going forward until that has been put forward by the communities. What's happened is, in light of these meetings over the last 2 to 3 weeks and these discussions over the last couple of months, we are grateful and we appreciate that the Wilmington District Office of the Corps is now very focused on trying to make sure that we get a resolution. We have had some conversation, and I'll let our folks from the Ferguson Group, including Earl Stockdale, who is a retired civil attorney formerly with the Corps. He's been able to have some direct discussions that have been understood about not only the history, but where we are now in this situation. Our job is to advocate for Holden Beach. And how we can do that and make it work within the original General Reevaluation Report without having to start all over again, because that would cost a lot of extra time and money. How can we take this original report that now, unfortunately, since it goes back to the time of not only being originally authorized in 1966 and 1990s, having the last plans and work and studies done, and then it stops up until the point of 2013. How can we use this to the advantage of getting work done on Holden Beach? That's our job. That's, I know, your commitment and your concern. The Corps, in just the last couple of weeks, has now said that they agree that a new GRR has to be done to get it updated. The technology is improved, the accuracy of that technology, the information needs to be updated since 2013. Okay? There is now a new initiative at the Corps that we can utilize that the Corps is already talking with us about, and that would be to look at how can we go forward. If this community is ready, and I know that you all are, and we've indicated to them that we want to look at a way to get the renourishment done and to look at a way to improve the opportunities for nourishment on this island. The Corps says that they know that a new GRR is needed, but the key is, can we keep it under the prior authorization? Because if you have to go back to Congress and get a project like this totally reauthorized all over again, now you're talking about years all of a sudden. So instead of having to get another whole authorization done, if we can update the work under the GRR, which is needed and required, and we understand that technologically and technically, already having the authorization, Congress has already authorized this, but let's update it, let's get a current GRR, and let's go forward. Then the Corps has indicated a willingness to work with us on that. And I know that Christine Brayman, who's with the Corps, who was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago or so with the town manager that he can attest to, has stated to our team that she is indeed going to do what she said, that she'll be back in touch. She'll plan to come before this council hopefully in the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks at least. And that they have the same opinion that we do not want to go back and have to get a new authorization. That we will take the authorization that was previously given and now focus it on, instead, a new GRR plan on how we get it done. And that saves time and money. And the Corps has a new emphasis now. They now have a program where they have just instituted, where they look at getting things done in a 3-year block of time. And essentially what they look at is a cost-sharing opportunity where if they find that the project is acceptable and that they found a way to do it, then they'll work with you to share that cost and get it done, and let you see it done in at least a 3-year increment of what it is they're trying to get accomplished. So what am I talking about practically? Okay, we've met with the Corps in Washington in March. We've been speaking with them constantly since then. We've had very good conversations with Pam Castens from the Wilmington District Office and Christine Brayman from the Wilmington District Office. The Corps, in fact, has already sent, as your town manager can attest, a sample draft of a letter of intent that we can go ahead and work with you and get it done. We're willing to go and get that draft, a letter of intent done, that you would like to see this project go forward, and let us know what the costs are, the ramifications, and the timetable. But you don't get that from the Corps unless we write the letter. So we are working with your town manager, and we'll be glad to help in drafting such a letter. The Corps is already expecting one. They would like to see, that the town is interested in moving forward on what you charged us to consider. Then they would respond with a timeline of what they could do when and what it would cost. So nobody's going into this blind. I mean, that's why you write a letter of intent. We'd like to get this done and tell us the timeline of what it would cost. And then we work with the existing authorization that has already occurred, rather than trying to go through an entire process to create a new one. And we work with the Corps so that they could produce a new GRR with current modeling, current data, and do it under the authorization previously given. The Corps then would report back, and they would have to let you know. And Christine Brayman will be here, like I said, probably for her estimation, probably in the next 3 weeks to discuss some of this with you. And then once you know what the timeline is, what the cost would be, they would be willing to work with you. The Corps' ideal on this kind of 3-year increments is around $3 million, and it's a cost share, $1.5 million each. That's their starting point, just so you know that. You don't think, what are we even talking about? But that's kind of under this new program the Corps has. That's what they're looking at. That's probably what they're going to propose. So we will see what they actually propose, but that's probably. The bottom line here is we're ready to go. The Corps now is giving indication it's ready to go after a very long time of stalemate. And I know Holden Beach is ready to go to see something happen. The ball is moving down the field. In operating as a team, there will be things that your town manager and assistant town manager have to do, and I'm sure will do, that your town attorney will do, that we will do, and that the Corps will do. The main thing is, are we each contributing to get that ball down the field where it should be. We're so thankful and glad to have the opportunity to work with you to see that moving forward. Now, with that, I would like to also add an addendum. Today, we met, as was indicated in the monthly legislative report, that the USDA Rural Development Office, which covers the southeastern region of North Carolina, is based in the mining town of Lumberton. They sent their top regional office manager and their top community facilities manager, who just met with us in an informal discussion a while ago to talk about the projects they can do. There's no official action taken, obviously. It's just a discussion. And they explain their programs and their projects, which of course yours truly has been familiar with through the years, because I used to chair that subcommittee in Congress for the U.S. House Agriculture Committee. Your manager shared with them about the Central Reach project and the success you've had with that. USDA, rural development, normally helps with fire stations and water towers and water sewer projects and public works facilities and town halls, but they stepped out, and as is public knowledge, they did a beach renourishment project at North Topsail Beach. And that was a new step, but it qualified, and it's something that our friends there had a beach renourishment project. So that is a possibility too. We wanted to go on and explore that possibility. So that's a possibility. If at some point, or any part thereof, of thought about helping the beaches, the beach coastline here at Holden Beach, that is a whole other avenue, is USDA rural development. They're in the business of doing very low interest loans for long term that you normally can't get. If you get a good low interest loan, for long term from a local bank, then that's supposed to be the first priority. But for it to be a government backed loan, then they try to, by definition, help rural areas, which includes this area. They can do loans up to 40 years. They can do it with no prepayment penalty, so you can do it for 40 and pay it off in 20 if you wanted to, or sooner. Right now, their locked-in rate is 4.25%. Once you lock it in, that's for the life of the loan. It's not going to go up. You have to just change the interest rate. And there are potential ways that it could actually go down, but it will not go up. That's another angle and another aspect. Of course, we know that also the local government commission for the state of North Carolina will be required to look at your finances and do some technical work so that USDA could proceed with something like that. But it is an opportunity. So I wanted to share with you, as you instructed us, as we talked last fall when we came before you officially brought us on board, that you want to leave no stone, or should we say no pebble left unturned, to try to find ways to help the beaches here. And that's exactly what we've been doing at every step of the way. There are other community facilities projects. I'll just say as a footnote, there are other projects that are outside the scope of what our responsibility is to this council and this commission. And we touched on that today just by way of information while our friends from USDA are here, that your town manager can share that with you. I know there's some other community facilities projects that the town may be interested in at some point. And if you desire help on those, we can talk about that possibility. But for today's purposes, we had them here to hone in on the possibility of beach renourishment. Was an aspect that could be considered. With that, Mayor, that's our official presentation for today. We appreciate y'all making this a special call meeting so we can have the time to make the presentation and have a chance to kind of bring to life what I normally send to you monthly, and you say, okay, what's behind all this verbiage? And now's a good time to show you, in light of where Congress is, in the bigger picture, in light of where we are in the local picture, now working at the core. And with that, and with your permission, I would like to I'll return to the table over here with the team, and then any of us can be available for some questions or some response that you would like to make to the comments.
Gentlemen and lady.
Y'all introduce yourselves and tell them what your role is with the Ferguson Group.
It's on. Sounds hot. Y'all hear me? I'm Stephanie Misser with the Ferguson Group. I've been with the Ferguson Group for about 6
Can
years.
you people in the back here?
No, sorry. Can't hear me? Okay. I'll speak louder. My name is Stephanie Misser. I'm with the Ferguson Group. I've been with the Ferguson Group for about 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Been in the news a lot lately. And I focus a lot of my work on water work, and I do a lot of work in coastal North Carolina as well, which is why I'm on the team for Holden Beach, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to work with you all.
Hi everyone, it's very nice to be here. My name is Earl Stockdale, and I have been working with the Ferguson Group for about 2 years now. I formerly was the chief counsel for the Corps of Engineers. In plain speak, that means I was their head lawyer. I oversaw the Corps' legal system, which is an extensive system of about 500 different attorneys and legal support personnel. Before that, I was the Deputy General Counsel of the Army for Civil Works and Environment and worked in the Pentagon. In those two positions, I have had a continuing connection to the Corps of Engineers and to the Corps of Engineers programs. I have advanced specialty legal training in environmental law, and so I have made my living focused on water issues generally and environmental issues relating both to the active military component of the Department of the Army and to all of the Corps of Engineers' civil functions.
My name is Roger Gwynn, and I'm the CEO of the Ferguson Group, and the great pleasure of being able to work with these folks. And can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. Speak directly. Again, my name is Roger Gwynn. I'm the CEO of the Ferguson Group, and I have the great pleasure of working with these folks. And again, the great pleasure. We appreciate very much the opportunity to work with you. I specialize principally in water resource and environmental related issues. I spent most of my time in Washington before joining the Ferguson Group 25 years ago. When I was on the Hill a long time ago, I worked principally in the appropriations area for Corps of Engineers, Bureau of Reclamation related issues, EPA and such. Again, I coordinate with the folks on our team and with Mike McIntyre, who leads the representation on your behalf in Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if you have any comments or questions, we'd welcome them.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Comments?
I might is the status in Washington changing one way or the other in terms of the federal people passing responsibility down to the states versus the federal people taking the jobs on themselves, financing it?
Well, generally the trend, I'm sure, as you well know, has been for the feds to pass it down to the states and to local government, much to the chagrin of the states and the local governments. And I don't see a change in that trend, and that's why when we have an opportunity to get help and get some assistance, because we know the tax base is obviously much smaller for towns by definition, or even for a state, then it's the time to avail that opportunity if you otherwise qualify. And that's where we want to make sure we're advocating anywhere and everywhere that you can qualify. Even with somebody like we talked about today with USDA Rural Development, they have funds specifically set aside because that's the sweet spot of what they're supposed to be doing, is helping communities that otherwise economically would fall behind, in America. I mean, in general, that's their mission because they don't have the resources for water and sewer or fire or water towers or practical things that are public services because they don't have the tax base. And so that's why coastal communities are included as rural areas, because this is not Miami, obviously. This is a rural area. This is a rural area of Brunswick County, and so we want to make sure that we avail ourselves of those opportunities.
I have a question about, it sounds like great news with the new GRR plan. Is that what was referred to as the 50-year plan? I just want to make sure I'm not assuming anything. Yes?
It was, and I don't know if y'all want to speak to that, given your history with the...
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was under the impression that there was some sort of, and I'll quote, some catch-up payment or some... Is that now not the case?
When we talk about the GRR and we talk about the Holden Beach component of the Brunswick Beaches project, what we're really talking about is trying to advance toward construction a portion of an already authorized project. That authorized project has preset, if you will, legal requirements as regards cost sharing. So those requirements are fixed by statute, okay? And they will not change. But what you're referring to is when that old, and I'm using the word old to say it is no longer current, when that GRR was being pursued, it first was pursued under requirements which allowed the federal government to pay all of the costs. And it started out being funded entirely by the federal government as part of construction general money. That rule changed and that policy changed midstream, and there became a requirement for non-federal interests, your community and other communities, to pay 50% of the cost. So with respect to that old GRR, at one point the study costs, the report costs, were at about $8 million, and the Corps estimated it would cost $500,000 more to complete that study. So there was discussion about balancing the books. In other words, making you pay 50% of the sunk costs, all the money already spent, and then having you pay the remaining $500,000 to complete the study. Roughly a bill to you of, over $4 million. Part of the good news that was buried in our report today, and I'm hoping to bring a little more prominence to it, is this idea that we will now start a new GRR, which will be designed to be completed on an accelerated basis, as Mr. McIntyre explained, within 3 years at a total cost of $3 million, which would be a 50-50 cost-shared expense, assuming it costs the full $3 million. But with respect to the former $8 million, as we understand it, there would be no obligation to catch up, to pay either the sunk costs or any costs related to possibly completing it. So it would be, in effect, resetting the groundwork.
Okay, that's what I was hoping you said, but I just wanted to.
And the Corps, and if I may add, the Corps in Washington informally, basically were saying there are new possibilities. I mean, that they couldn't commit right then, but he's described it, and I don't want to overstate it. And actually, it's $550,000. The figure you said about $500,000, it's $550,000. Just so you'll know, that's what the figure was. If we were to still go forward with the old GRR, there was a debate about the sunk costs, the $8 million. If you're going to have to pay half of that, and then there was a discussion about, well, whatever you do, you've at least got to pay $550,000 to go forward. Well, now that's all being revisited and potentially reset, and that's the note of optimism here that, hey, the Corps is serious about working with us to reset this and do a new GRR and go forward in the way we've described.
Yeah, that's great news. But it also, Ocean Isle has been involved, is part of the old program, if you will, right?
Right.
And we have other coastal communities too, right?
Right.
Oak Island and
Right.
Caswell.
Yes.
So we could incorporate them into this new program, as well.
What,
Or not.
if I may,
Go ahead.
what is envisioned here is to peel Holden Beach out as its own separate standalone GRR.
Okay, fair, okay, that's why I'm asking.
That's the way that we've
So-
entered into this
And
discussion.
maybe another way to think about that, and that's certainly correct, but it maybe would be helpful to clarify the following. What this GRR is intended to do is to come up and identify a plan of improvements to provide storm protection to the community and to keep your beach healthy and stable. So this plan would identify an on-the-ground, if you will, construction solution, which would be undertaken initially. And then you always, if you build the plan, will have out-year maintenance obligations associated with that. But the point of this is that the original plan of improvements, was arrived at many years ago in connection with the 1966 authorization. So what the Corps is doing and will do through this GRR is bring everything up to date, use new modeling, we'll use new environmental documentation, we'll use new technology, and we'll say, this is the plan that we want to do, and we are focusing now on a plan for your community, a way to advance protection for this area.
Right, that's our advocacy, that's our charge. Now, this is not to the disparagement of the other towns. We want to make that clear in case somebody walks out of here and thinks this is not to the disparagement. They are free to pursue as they want to pursue. We're not inhibiting anybody else. What we're doing is saying, let's get on with it for Holden Beach. And if the Corps is willing to peel off with the new studies, the new modalities, the up-to-date techniques, and we're ready to go, we have a letter of intent, let's go and go. And the Corps is open to that, which is wonderful. And that's a choice the other towns can make too, but that's up to them. We're concerned with what we're doing for you, and that's the good news here.
Yeah, the prior included that, so which was a kind of another complication.
Right.
Is there some reason that we wouldn't get state and county support on that? Because it affects the economy of the county and the state?
That'll probably be a discussion you'll have to have with your county and state officials. Obviously, with the Corps, we're dealing with, by definition, obviously a federal agency, and we're looking at what we can do through the Corps funding so that we're not inhibited by anybody else.
Yeah, I guess over the last year, maybe longer, I've been very concerned about the Corps and the interaction that we have.
Yes.
And
We have to.
I've always been a collaborative person in a collaborative environment, and I felt just the opposite.
Yes.
So what you guys are kind of saying right now, certainly, we've really gone the extra step. We've really worked hard, really, really hard at not only identifying what our current needs are, but we're looking also at long term. What do we need? Where are we going? And I'm so encouraged to hear you guys talk about the right types of things. Storm protection, erosion. We know that our east end of the island has a decent erosion factor. I know back in 2005 when I first came here to the island, well, actually in 1998 when I came to the island, right, there was the house, the yellow house on the end of the island had huge sandbags in front of it, huge. And the water was lapping over those bags. If you go down there now, right, and take a look at it, you'll see a completely different picture of what I'm
You talking
saying.
about Amazing Grace?
Amazing Grace.
Yes. We were there. We went there today.
Yeah. And, however, the concern that I had in the meetings that I've attended with the Corps I have huge concerns. So again, once again, I'm so happy to hear you folks, feel encouraged by it. And science is an important factor here too, as well. It's not only the science, but we're all in this together. When I say we all,
Yes.
we're all in this together. And it's important that we, and we work with the company, ATM,
Yes.
you know about that. And tonight we're going to hear a little bit about modeling of the inlet. And it's important that we advance ourselves and work together to educate ourselves, because the more education we have, the better we're going to be able to enlighten the Corps as to not we, Holden Beach, sure we want the sand, but let's put it in a logical sense as to why we want the sand and why we need the sand. And the more we can do that, the better off we're going to be in that. And I think, David has certainly done a good job, and he's been as probably discouraged over the year and working with the Corps as, the meetings that I've attended as well. So, again, my thrust would be educate, science, test, modeling. Let's demonstrate exactly. It's just not us talking, but it's the proof. Here's the proof of the pudding. I don't want to get down the road 10 years from now and then Amazing Grace isn't there anymore.
Right.
But if we don't do something about it and recognizing the erosion factors on the east end of this island, Amazing Grace will not be there. So, we're all working together. We're all coming together. And, the plan sounds really, really great to me. It really, really does. I am concerned about short term. I'm concerned about long term. Long-term plans are very, very critical. Some of the terms in a long-term plan that you identified may not work, but most will. But if we don't identify them and put them on a piece of paper and put a plan together to achieve those and hold ourselves accountable for that as well, and our residents expect nothing less than of us. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Roy. Just one couple of additional comments. I do think, again, you are in a good spot with the Corps of Engineers. It's a transformative place to be. Again, just to emphasize what's already been said, but the new GRR offers tremendous benefits in terms of savings of time and money. Remember, at one point, and including one of the fact sheets that you've been presented in the past from the Corps, made a reference even to, or in past correspondence, there have been references to potentially having to initiate a new feasibility study process and start all over, and basically walking away from your existing authorization, and that would have added additional time and money beyond the study and time and cost, as Congressman McIntyre mentioned, additional time associated with getting that authorized. So you are certainly in a good spot. The one other thing that's been said, there's been a reference to this expedited review process that this new GRR will be completed under, and it's there's been a reference to 3 years and $3 million. And again, just to emphasize, that's a cap, both in terms of time and in terms of money. It could be less, and certainly, we will be working with you, with your staff and your consultants to make sure that the Corps uses the greatest degree possible. Any information that's been developed to date in past studies or by you directly to again achieve additional savings, shorten that total cost and the time that's required to complete it. And then one last thing I wanted to actually ask Earl to tell you a little bit about too, in terms of the letter correspondence going back to the Corps. There's initiating this process where you're asking for this assistance. There's been an effort or a willingness on their part to work collaboratively with you on that even, and you might just elaborate on that briefly.
Yes, thank you. Both Congressman McIntyre and Mr. Gwynn referred to this letter of intent. And I guess the first thing I should clarify is that letter of intent is not a binding document. Its purpose is to allow you to approach the Corps of Engineers to say, we want to move this component of the project forward. We are prepared to participate as is required under applicable law. And then it puts the onus on the Corps of Engineers to come back to you with a plan, a study plan that would identify what's going to occur, on what schedule, and at what cost. So it's a communication tool to allow everyone to understand the path forward, the implications for all parties, and the costs. And so that's its purpose. The Corps, we have been talking to the Corps quite regularly. In fact, Stephanie and I spoke to some Corps folks, Christine Brayman on the way down. She has already, as we said, sent David a sample letter to use to sort of kick off this process. That letter needs to be fine-tuned. We're going to work on that letter, and we will share our work very closely with you, but the Corps of Engineers has also offered to look at the letter in draft form. So what we will be able to do is take the letter they sent us, fine-tune it, share it with you, not sign it, send it to the Corps, make sure we've got this thing all teed up properly. So we've got your interests best represented, and so that we identify any issues in advance and avoid, possibly locking people into positions that are hard to back up from, or getting discussions moving in directions where we're actually slowing processes down rather than speeding them up. So, the short-term objective for us would be to take that letter and work with you, fine-tune it, and share it with the Corps of Engineers.
The other thing I forgot to mention was, and I know David probably did a great job of introducing you folks. I know, Mike, you're familiar with the Central Reach Pro program.
Yes, sir.
That we have.
Been out there twice.
And what
the
we've
last
been
2
able to
months.
do, what we've been able to accomplish. And true, we lost a significant amount of sand during the storms. But if we didn't have that Central Reach program in place, our beaches would have been devastated, in my mind, devastated. And I'm sure that other people will support that comment that I just made as well. So that's a positive. That's a real positive. Does the world really know what we did? And I'm not talking about the world, but the Corps. These are the reasons why we have to replenish. This is a tremendous story out here. Tremendous story that we have. And I have to compliment the town of Holden Beach and all the taxpayers and everything else that paid for that project, that are in the process of paying for that project and that. But it works, and that certainly demonstrates that. So, David,
Well,
thank
and
you.
I'll key on that though too, the East End, the dredging and renourishment of the East End, that's what we, the difference in there is. It's interesting, the 3-year blocks, that's good, and the collaboration. I just think we need a plan. It seems like it's a year, we need to correct that every year. We have to figure out what the Corps of Engineers is going to do for the dredging of inlet valves. I hope this sounds like a direction we're going to do at least a 3-year block, which is good.
All right.
Going back to what Mr. Gwynn said, the 3-year block cap of roughly $3 million, have you gotten any type of discussion or impression on what type of projects they're talking about specifically?
No, and Earl can elaborate, and Mike as well. But it's not. There's the 3 by 3 by 3 process, which is what it's referred to as a sort of across the board, regardless of project type. It's just a commitment by the Corps to work with non-federal sponsors to minimize the cost to get to a project that can be delivered to address the community's needs, whatever that project may be. And so, but in this instance, you know, we're hopeful that it'll be less than 3 years and less than $3 million, but and that would be $1.5 million that you would be responsible for, as the non-federal sponsors would be responsible for. But that's you know, would be determined through the response to your correspondence and the work plan that the Corps would develop to try to reach mutual agreement on, you know, how that would proceed.
And I think that I'd add in here that's probably a good segue into when Christine comes down to meet with the board and brief you up on some of the specific technical aspects of that 3 by 3 and what the Wilmington District's piece of the action here is. And she's provided me with her bad dates, and Heather will do a calendar call for y'all sometime, and hopefully we can get this done within the next month as well.
Yeah, there are details, right? How's this, you know,
Yeah.
shallow draft inlet program?
Yeah.
How does this work with, you know, the other things we've got?
And the new program, the 3 by 3 by 3, that's more or less being authorized or okayed by the people in Washington, not just the people in Wilmington, or is this just something from the people in Wilmington that
Well,
are saying that this is the new plan?
No, this is actually congressionally directed, and so it's absolutely being endorsed. The commitment to produce a product, a report, within certainly no less than 3 years, or no more than 3 years, and no more than $3 million is an outgrowth of that. And the district is certainly implementing that headquarters policy.
In conjunction with not having to contribute to the sunk money or the $500,000.
Right, we're correct.
Anyone else? Well, I, for one, am proud that we have the A-team on our side. And I think we all can agree that we look forward to accomplishing many good things as a result of their efforts in conjunction with our wants and needs. So we appreciate everything that you've done so far, and we know the future is bright. We're going to go forward in a positive way with a lot of success. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We adjourn.